It's not that you are fertile or you are infertile, but throughout your marriage, for most people, there's going to be times where your body is fertile and there's going to be times when your body is not fertile. And that's just a circumstance that you find yourself in. And, at some point, you're going to go through menopause and then your body will not be fertile anymore, but your marriage is always fertile. Your marriage is always fruitful. There's new life that he's going to bring about through every season of your marriage, and it's not limited to biology.
Welcome to the Truth and Fertility Podcast. I'm Haley Yeager. Today I'm sitting with Cassi and Ian Durnan. I've known them for a couple years now. We met at a retreat, maybe, 2022, I think, is when we met on this leadership retreat for the Catholic Diocese of Phoenix. And then I re-met them again. I believe it was maybe last year or the year before, something. The timeline's kind of fuzzy, but we met again at an NFP in-service for all the NFP instructors in the Diocese of Phoenix, and they gave a talk at that in-service that was very inspiring to me. And Cassi and Ian have a story that I think is going to really inspire a lot of our listeners today as well, because I know if it hit my heart as much as it did, I know that our listeners are going to I know it's going to happen the same for our listeners. So I think it's a story of it's a hard story. It's a hard story. I'm sure it's a hard story to tell, and it's a hard story to receive, because it really comes down to, how do you work with the Lord in suffering? How do you reconcile suffering with the Lord? And that is the golden question. I feel like, why does God allow suffering? And when he does allow suffering, how do we reconcile that? How do we reconcile that? So I don't want to talk anymore, because I want to let Cassi and Ian, why don't you guys introduce yourselves, introduce maybe your marriage, wherever you'd like to start, and then just kind of get on into it and your story of your guys' fertility journey.
All right. Thank you so much for having us, Haley. We are delighted to be here and to be able to share our story. I'm Cassi.
Ian Durnan.
And we have now been married for 17 years. And we are living back in our hometown where we grew up and where we got married. So we were kind of high school sweethearts-ish. And that's where it all started.
Now we're over here in Globe, Arizona. It's about an hour and 5-minute drive east of the Phoenix metro area.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we've
Depending
been
on where you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been married 17 and a half years. But before that, we dated for probably about 6 years. So we're high school sweethearts, and we hit it off pretty young. She was 17 and I was 18, and pretty much been together for the most part since then. So.
Yeah. So he went to U of A in Tucson, and I went to Steubenville. So we had long distance that whole time. And we got married at 23 and 24, and we just took it for granted that we would be probably having a large family. We thought that the challenge that we were going to have with NFP was that we were going to be having difficulty spacing our children, because his dad's family was like
19 brothers and
children.
sisters, yeah.
We have just
Wow.
just big families, and we didn't really know anybody personally who had struggled with infertility, or at least who was open about it. And it didn't cross our minds very much. When we were on the Engaged Encounter weekend, they had the question that was asking, like, what would you do if you were not able to have children? And we just quickly said, oh, we would just adopt. Like, and then it was like, pass by that question. We don't even think we're going to have to think about that.
So in our early marriage, we ended up pretty much after that first year of being married, we were practicing NFP, and we just thought, well, we'll give ourselves a year to kind of, get used to life and get our careers underway and get into a flow and to get a home. So we ended up buying a house over in the heart of Gilbert, and we got it. It was strategic. We put a lot of work into it, but it was right across the street from a park, a really nice neighborhood. It was 4-bed, 2.5 bath, 2,039 square feet. We just thought, well, that should be pretty good to have a bunch of little army of Durnans in there. And we thought, well, if that's not, enough space. Well, we'll just bunk beds, we'll figure it out. So, yeah,
Game
or
plan.
there was a lot of momentum in those early years of, yeah, let's get ourselves ready to put out a bunch of little baby Durnans. And
Yeah.
I thought maybe we would have, I was comfortable with like five. I was like, if we had five kids, that'd be pretty good. What about you?
Yeah, we would just say however many the Lord gives us, and we
Right.
didn't know that the number that the Lord would give us of biological children would not be any. And that is kind of the beginning of our story, and I just already kind of told you the end, but no, that is definitely not the end. But yeah, so things were going along, and I started to realize that I thought like, wow, we're really good at this NFP thing. We're so good at using
Yeah.
these um infertile windows or whatever. And but then come to find out there was something wrong with me, with my health. So I ended up finding out I had severe endometriosis, like kind of as severe as it can get. And
Mm.
I mean, I remember when they said, like, you most likely will not be able to have children. And I was like, what? Like, I couldn't even like register that or process that. But, we just tried to do everything that we could medically to deal with that. And it was, it was just really aggressive form. So it ended up being a lot having to do with my health in addition to infertility. So, just so many surgeries, so many it's not even like worth going into all of them because it's just like every couple years it was some major thing. Um even it even it was yeah, it was kind of like life threatening at some point. So
Wow.
but we ended up going to the Pope Paul VI Institute in Omaha, Nebraska and had incredible care there, beautiful experience. And that's the I think I don't know, it was a couple years ago, finally, for the sake of my health, the only thing that really was left to be done was I did have to have a hysterectomy. So at that point, it was like definitively, our physical fertility journey was over. And um, along the way, there was just so much healing and grace that it's just astounding to look back and see what all the Lord was doing. But um I remember so when I talk about this, it's from a totally different perspective than in the first 5 or 10 years even of going through this. So if there are people who are listening, it's some things might be hard to hear, but I just really want to give people hope so much because in those times, in those years where it was hardest for me, I so badly wanted to hear a story where um, if somebody didn't get that miracle baby and they were still okay, I felt like, okay, it might be okay. And it was hard to find that because there are so many people who would spend their entire quote unquote fertile years like desperately trying for a baby and believing that that was the only hope was that they eventually would have a child, and nobody can tell you that. Nobody can tell you for sure that that's ever going to happen. um so I want people to know that even if worst case scenario it doesn't happen, God has a beautiful plan for your marriage. He has a beautiful plan for your fertility. And that's what we've come to realize throughout this is that like, well, for one thing, I like how somebody said it from We Carry You Still, Jacqueline.
Oh, Jocelyn.
Jocelyn,
Jocelyn
sorry.
Abiad.
Sorry,
I've
Jocelyn.
actually had her on the podcast. So
Yes,
she's
I knew I was
amazing. I
getting it
will link
wrong
her
a
in the
little
show
bit.
notes. That yeah,
Yeah,
We Care You Still is a ministry for women who have miscarried.
yeah.
Yeah.
So she put it that like fertility is kind of like a spectrum. It's not that you are fertile or you are infertile, but throughout your marriage, for most people, there's going to be times where your body is fertile and there's going to be times when your body is not fertile. And that's just a circumstance that you find yourself in. Um, Sometimes you might be hyper fertile, and those are all just different things that people go through in their marriage. And at some point, you're going to go through menopause, and then your body will not be fertile anymore, but your marriage is always fertile. Your marriage is always fruitful. God is always blessing your unity in life-giving ways, and it's up to us to have open hands to receive what he has for us. That your marriage has a mission, that there's new life that he's going to bring about through every season of your marriage, and it's not limited to biology. So, that's been a journey of discovery for us for sure.
Yeah. If we can go back to because what I do definitely want to get to how the Lord your walk with the Lord in that journey. But I want to get back to the very beginning first off, because you said that you ended up having severe endometriosis. And so you said, for the first year of your marriage, you were using NFP to avoid pregnancy. When did you ever have any signs of endometriosis? Like, did you ever have really painful periods? Like, were there any signs that maybe something was wrong beforehand that you just didn't know to look for? And then how long did it take of when you guys decided, okay, yeah, we do have the house in Gilbert, in family friendly Gilbert, and we now, we're wanting children now. What was that timeline like of when you got to the point of realizing, oh my word, I have severe endometriosis?
Yeah, I want to tell young women all the time about about this because there's so many things that we kind of think of as normal because people are just like, "Oh, that's just part of being a woman. It's just this time of the month things hurt really bad." Well, you don't know really what is normal and not normal if everybody tells you that it's just like suck it up,
That
that's
it
part
is
of being a
normal.
woman.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
now now that I know more, yes, there were signs. um just like a lot of pain. and and actually I kept going around to different doctors thinking I was having UTIs, like recurring UTIs, but then it would come back negative, but they would have already given me antibiotics and it was just like, okay, whatever. And I had like gastrointestinal stuff and nobody was able to really like put together that puzzle um for a long time because it was like just go to this specialist, go to that specialist. And that's one of the things that they're saying now is like endometriosis is really not just a reproductive thing. It's like a systemic thing. People can have endometriosis on their lungs, on their it's just throughout. So yeah, that's one of the
If I interject,
yeah.
I remember those days too because she would complain to me like, "Oh, she'd be taking lots of like, pain, pain and anti-inflammation. She would bother her. I think she would even take some time off of work here and there, and that was such a subjective pain thing because a lot of women like, oh, it's just you don't, you have no way to compare it, like she said, and so whenever I started noticing, yeah, that now I look back, noticing that, hey, when you are taking a lot of like, yeah, those kind of like pain medications, needing to, it's disrupting your normal flow, like in your career or
Mhm.
things that you do that, your hobbies, that sort of thing. If you're noticing that, that's the part, where you'd want to reach out and get help. And then the other thing that was a complicating factor was because it was a cyclical type of pain, yeah, when you schedule up with the doctor, oh yeah, we can see you in 3 weeks. Well, you'd be feeling junky for 2.5 weeks, and then right when it's time for your appointment, you roll in, and you kind of forget like just how much pain you were in at the time that you scheduled the appointment. And that happened quite a bit over the years
Mhm.
with not just the beginning, but yeah, I just remember that.
Yeah. Um so eventually I had a situation where uh I had to go to the doctor. I had never gone to a gynecologist, believe it or not.
That's
And
so many young girls that I talk to. They've
yeah.
like even early marriage, they've never been. And I'm always like, 21 or marriage, whenever that starts,
Yeah, I
like
highly
you
recommend it.
need to go. Yeah.
Yeah, so they did an ultrasound and they saw just huge endometriomas, these, like, grapefruit size cysts in there. Um, and then I that was when I was scheduled for my first surgery. So I guess from the time um, so we had been using NFP, and then we were just like, charting, but not really trying to, like, prevent anything, and we just thought, "Well, it'll happen in its time." And I think it was, like, a couple of years that we were just like, it'll happen in the Lord's time," and we were not anxious about it. I wasn't really thinking I was experiencing infertility, um, until, yeah, I had to go get seen, and then that's what it's just, like, very quickly unraveled from there.
So, what did you decide to get seen by a doctor because you were realizing, oh, it's been a few years and we haven't gotten pregnant? Or was it like completely separate from that? You decided to go to the doctor and then it became clear as to why pregnancy wasn't occurring.
Yeah, um it was not for infertility at all. Like,
Okay.
it was just for health reasons. I think originally it was actually because the recurring UTI thing. Somebody said, like, "Hey, you should go to a gynecologist." I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah. So
Yeah.
then as you're going and both this, I mean, the story is both of you, as you both are going through all, you said, tons of surgeries and tons of doctor's appointments to the point where you're going to Nebraska to go be seen by the wonderful doctors at Pope Paul, now St. Paul VI Institute. Um, can you just talk about that journey between the two of you? Like, how did that rock your marriage at all? Did that rock your faith at all? Can you talk more about how that experience changed you and maybe struggles in that?
Yeah, one thing that was really difficult, and that it commonly is difficult in marriages, that you are experiencing this reality very differently. That it was just soul crushing and horrible to me, like, thinking, what if I never become a mother? Like, that was like the epitome of love, of become yeah, just being able to love in this particular way. And and almost it wasn't until I heard that I would not be able to do that, or might not be able to be a mother, that it ever even dawned on me how much I wanted to. But for Ian, it was very different, so you can tell that part.
Yeah. I remember too, yes, going in, when they finally said, Cassie's condition, and they just said, "Have you ever considered adoption?" It was kind of it was just their way of smoothing over the message that, hey, the odds
Mhm.
aren't in your favor. And yeah, that was rough, even coming from people who are Catholic, Catholic doctors, Catholic specialists. And so it was, and that was really tough on Cassie, tough on me to try to help navigate through that. But I'd say the big struggle for me was that I didn't want to go there. When Cassie was first kind of going through infertility, and the years were going by, those early years are going by, and our friends, they're getting pregnant. People we know at work, young whippersnappers, they're getting pregnant. I never allowed myself to really desire that. I was like, no, we're good. And Cassie's going through a hard time with the infertility thing, and so I just felt like if I stepped into that, went down that ladder into that dark, tough place where she was, that I'd get stuck in there too. And yeah, I didn't know what to do with her pain. I didn't know what to say. And I'd say those early days in marriage, through those early years, you just think, well, when she's sad, I'm going to cheer her up, so I'm going to try to make her laugh, or, so you start to do these things to kind of compensate for it. And that doesn't work in marriage. It's not, it's where I started realizing it was stepping into her experience, and starting to understand more of, yeah, that loss that she was feeling. And it's kind of kind of interesting now because I didn't actually start feeling it as much, the, hey, I'm not going to be a father until it's kind of strange. Just as she was kind of letting go, I was like, oh my gosh, like if we had a child, our child would be 12 years old right now because my neighbors get, like, and now kids are graduating high school. I'm like, wow, kids are 17 years old, 18 years old. That could have been one of our children graduating high school right now. And I feel it now more than I ever did in those early days. And part of it is I do think it's good in that I acknowledge something that a feeling that I was ignoring and swallowing and just being like, it's for other men. It's all good. But then also too, uh, taking it a little step further is I actually didn't feel worthy to be a father. I felt that because of my past sins, because of my flaws in my character, that the Lord was just saying, "Hey, other men are fit to be fathers, Ian, but not you. And I'm going to work on you. Maybe you'll have kids." And it's kind of interesting because spiritually, psychologically, I was feeling as though like the Lord is just hitting pause on my bloodline, because I needed to work on my self betterment. And it's kind of interesting because while endometriosis wasn't from the male side, but I still felt responsible for something. And and it's just really interesting, to sit back and just realize like as the years went by, I started suffering from things like depression and issues in my career, started going to counseling and great Catholic counselors that I ran into, learned so much that I just started realizing like, yeah, the Lord has given me the opportunity to grow as a man, to grow um, as a father in such an astonishing way in that over all these procedures that Cassie was going through, I was her primary caregiver. Like this woman who was always so strong, so animated, who knew all the answers. Like, hey, she's going to be down for like a month and a half after this procedure, and she's going to be very vulnerable. And so it took years to realize this, but I look back now and I'm like, thank you, Lord, that I could be tender with her, that I could encourage her, that I could hold her, that I could just, yeah, to treat her tenderly like I would my own little girl, and I want to cry when I say that because in so many ways Cassie's been that for me. I've been her little boy. She's she's here to continue mothering me and growing me to be a stronger man of God. And it's been very interesting, I guess I'd say that growing together in that motherhood and fatherhood have actually still continued to bloom and blossom and grow even though we don't have children. And we have children of all ages. They're little ones, they're some our age, some older than us. We have a lot of godchildren, and so we have this availability to be there for God's children in a way that others can't. And as difficult as it was earning our stripes, if you will, going through the ups and downs, I do believe that we've figured out, like we've been stumbling forward by God's grace. We do the next right thing through prayer, through counseling, through journaling, through having conversations with one another, sitting with each other in these feelings and these complex, you have like five feelings all at once, when you get someone's baby shower announcement, so we went through a lot of triggers like that. And I just give glory to God that yeah, we started to connect with each other more and more. Sorry, I don't mean to go on too long, but I'll stop it at that.
No, that's great. A question, or an image that's been in my mind as you were talking was you said earlier on, Ian, that you felt like you couldn't face it because you would fall in the pit with Cassie. And you mentioned how there's, of course, a fear of looking at it and realizing the reality of it. But do you think that there was another part of you that also felt like you couldn't face it because you really just had to be there for Cassie? And if you were down in the pit with her, you wouldn't have been able to pull her up to give her that tenderness, that care, that love that she
Yeah.
needed. Like, talk a little bit about that.
Mhm.
Like, of course there's a fear of looking at the reality, but was it also just your role as husband, you couldn't face it maybe yet at that time?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, sister. You really hit on a really important thing. How do I say this? You have to know how to swim to not drown. You get all sorts of different waves and, places in life. You get hit with these emotional waves, as I call them. You have to learn how to swim. And for me, I didn't want to go down that ladder, going into that little pit of, of that sorrow, of that sadness, of that darkness, that desolation, um, because I didn't know how to swim in it. And so I do believe if I look back in all honesty, I didn't know a lot of emotions, So when I started going into counseling, that was in my late, pretty much, well, actually my early 30s that I started going into counseling, that I started realizing that all these complex emotions that you go through. And when you learn to name them, like, hey, you're experiencing confusion, you're experiencing jealousy, you're experiencing, desolation. You started coming up with all these words, you start naming these feelings. And before you know it, you learned how to swim. You learned how to go down into the water, into the depths, and swim around and say, okay, I see what's going on. And what was happening so often was, in my own life, I felt it through my, going through depression. I look at depression as a whole bunch of undiagnosed feelings that you haven't dealt with, and so it gums up your inner software. If you have a laptop and you don't take care of the the antivirus, and you don't kind of run these little system cleaning, organizing processes in the background, it's going to get gummed up and it won't work. Well, that was what was happening to me as a man, as a Catholic man. I was going to church every Sunday. I was being there for my wife. I was being strong. I was supposed to be strong, Haley. That was the thing, is when she's weak, you be strong. So that was swallowing feelings, ignoring feelings. It was pushing through. But when you do that, you don't pace yourself, you break, and you're not learning, you're not creating this feedback loop, I guess, of learning how to deal with problems, name it to tame it with a lot of these emotions. So I'd say that that was what helped me now. Like the version that I am now is like, 10 versions of Ian later. But it was because I started learning how to swim through these emotions, like learning how to surf. If you know how to surf correctly, you won't get eaten up by the wave. And that's what it is in life, is each cycle that you and your spouse are going through, you get, your hopes will get up, and then sometimes they'll go down. And so you're like, oh my gosh, and it's very difficult, and you get gobbled up by those feelings where you shut down, you just, you name it. That's where our attachment to things, like Facebook or entertainment, eating, hedonism, whatever it is, you do it to comfort yourself, because you just got, you got hit pretty hard by a whole big wave of emotions. So I'd say it was just learning how to deal with the emotions. When I started learning how to deal with that, helped us. It was very, very helpful, because then you can hear God's voice once you could quiet down and name things. I don't know how else to describe it, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, that yeah. Thank you for saying all of that, because that especially as the husband, as the male figure, I think that what you're describing is what so many men need, and not very many men have the access to, like access to a good therapist that's going to help you name those things, or just getting past the maybe an original feeling of shame of feeling like you need to go see a therapist. I mean, that for men and for women. So I feel like that's not as much in our culture anymore. I feel like therapy has
Yeah.
become a lot more accepted, even in the last, 10 years or so. But yeah, Ian, thank you. Thank you for sharing all of that. And Cassie, I'm curious to know what your side of it looked like too, as you were talking about how, when you realized, because it sounds to me like you realized you faced reality sooner than Ian did, of what the situation actually was, of this severe endometriosis is actually going to prevent me from being a biological mother. And so when you were looking at that reality, what was that like for you?
Yeah, it was really difficult, especially when at first we weren't really united in facing that. So I felt very alone. I felt very isolated, and I felt um like I had such a strong desire in my heart. And, God's word says that he will fulfill the desires of our heart. And yet, we were praying all the novenas. We were going on the pilgrimages. Everybody in the world was praying for us. And every time somebody had a new thing for us to pray,
We
we're
did
like,
it.
okay, okay, that's one I haven't done. Maybe that's the magic one. Um, and I just felt like if it was going to be God's will, it was going to happen. But then there came this kind of distance between me and God and my heart in a certain way where it was like, okay, well, all that matters is God's will, and my desire obviously does not factor into this. Um, and so maybe I'm offering this up and this is for the good of the world, for the salvation of souls or whatever, but it's like God doesn't personally care about me and my desires, or else he wouldn't let me go through this because it's so painful. And I was like, Lord, this is not making me a better person. I don't know what you're thinking here. This is making me much worse. But that wasn't true. That's the way that it felt though. And
How did you come to realize that that wasn't true?
oh, now that's the whole process, right? um Spiritual direction, prayer, continuing in prayer even though it felt totally I was just kind of like, I would say I was mostly like um well, journaling and counseling and so many, many, many things. But ultimately there was there was one night where we were driving around and I just told Ian, I hate hope. I hate it. I don't want it. It makes my life miserable. Because if I didn't hope and if I didn't have this desire, then I wouldn't have this suffering. So I was kind of grappling with that, and and sometimes they say like, pray, Lord, if this is not your will, take this desire away from me. But honestly, that desire has never left me and I don't think it ever will, and I thank God for that because it keeps me in touch with a part of myself that's core to my being as a woman and um and we all have that capacity for maternity in our hearts, and I think it makes me continue to have compassion for people who are really in the depths of that sorrow, and that's part of kind of like the way that allows me to continue ministering to people, I think. But anyways, so I was really struggling with not being um I'm not feeling like close to God and his personal love for me. And one day in prayer I was just like, Lord, you say that you are the God of all comfort. So I need you to comfort me. And that was one of those moments of like vulnerability with the Lord because I think I was just trying to be like, I'm a good Catholic, I'm a good Christian. I'm just going to tough it out, and the Lord already has me in the palm of his hand, and it's like
He's out there taking care of the lost
yeah,
sheep.
it's like miracles are for people who they need to see that they will have a miracle in order for them to believe in his love. And I was like, I already believe in your love, so I guess you don't have to try that hard with me anymore. It was messed up. I had messed up um image of God, really.
Mhm.
And that was one of the things in spiritual direction that my spiritual director helped me to work through is like, how has this experience of infertility affected your image of God, your image of yourself, your image of yourself as a woman, as a sister, as a friend, as a wife, and to be able to go through and like pick apart those lies that are just like running in the background sometimes. And I really think like infertility did not cause that. It just caused it to be brought to the surface. So in that way, I am grateful for that because we're all going to have something in life, some type of suffering that causes us, or that is kind of an opportunity, as terrible as all suffering is, but to see like, why does this hurt so bad to me in particular, the way that I'm experiencing it? And like, when was the first time I felt that way? And like, what were these circumstances? And you just start like teasing apart these things where God gets to speak his truth into those places where something had gotten a little warped along the way. And yeah, that's kind of.
You remind me actually, to add on that, where the attributes,
Mm-hmm.
God's attributes, and I love that. I remember she came home with a list from her spiritual direction, and it was just, and it showed, God is this, and here's where it says in Scripture, and I loved that because that was the thing for me too. Is we weren't able to have children, like cycles. And so I was like, well, I want to grow in my faith. I want fellow Catholic men. So I started stumbling forward, if you will, where I started going to men's group at church and All Saints there in Mesa. And it was just great because I started learning so much about my faith, so much about scripture, and so much about God's attributes. And so when she came home, it kind of like was getting she was, how someone gives you a string to like get a bunch of the beads that you've been collecting, like, hey, I learned all these things from men's group and from scripture and reading that book and that book. And that was so powerful because God is for me. The Lord loves me. The Lord wants to see me successful. The Lord didn't choose for this to happen to me. And I think that was one of the most, I think for me, eye-opening, heart-freeing things was that, like, the Lord, it wasn't saying, Ian, you're not good enough to be a father. You're not good enough to add to my church attendance. It started becoming like, wow, the Lord, he is my encourager. He loves me. He's devoted to me. That's actually one of the most powerful descriptors I have for God. Is I'll say it, I'm like, Lord, thank you, my devoted love, and my most intimate love. And I like to address the Lord that way because he is really for me. He wants to, just like Cassie loves me so much unconditionally, that I realize, like, hey, that's God loving me through her. That's what it is. And I think that's the other thing too, is that we started complimenting each other, like, hey, thank you for holding me in that moment, or hey, thank you for, and we started realizing that is the Lord's love coming into your marriage. And it's those attributes that you're living out as you're healing, as you're growing, as you're discovering more about God's character, how he's for you. I am a beloved son, and I'm not any less good, and I don't understand fatherhood any less better than men who have 15 kids, kind of thing, where I can be there for others. I have that yearning, and I love how you said that, Cassie. Like, you still have that yearning to be a mother. I still have that yearning to be a father that's coming in stronger than it ever has. But I still use it to say, you know what, Lord, I have this energy. I'm watching who needs my encouragement right now, who needs a hug, who needs whatever it is. And I can see that I'm more sensitive and receptive to it because I have the bandwidth. We're, like we call it, we're radically available to what the Lord is calling us to. And I think that's one of the most special side effects, a good side effect of just our journey of healing, and realizing that the Lord has nothing but blessings and green pastures for us, even though we're traveling through this broken world. He didn't want it to be this way. He's a good God. He's a loving God. He has your back. Um, and you're going to make it through this. And that's the part where, yeah, we just started trusting and growing in that, in the Lord's character, and trusting him over the years. We just started to be able to trust him. I think when I started to trust him more, that's where healing and that's where strength started growing from. It needs to be a fertile ground like that for something to grow strong. And I really do believe that helped a lot. Yeah, that fertility in our marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's actually a topic I want to get to, with how the Lord didn't take away your desire for motherhood and your desire for fatherhood, but he's fulfilling that in ways that you didn't expect. But before we dive into that, I want to bring up something, Cassie, that you said that really struck me, which was that when you were going through this suffering and things were coming up, whereas like, God doesn't care about my desires, God doesn't care, God isn't good, God isn't, just this warped vision of who God is, you said it wasn't necessarily this warped vision of who God is didn't start when the suffering started. It was there, but the suffering brought it about. Like, it brought to life what your warped vision of God was. And I this is the first time I have ever heard it posed that way. And I think that is so helpful. It
Mm.
is so helpful to at least just put suffering in a context to say, okay, I mean, the suffering is hard. Lord, I know the truth of who you are, but I don't see you at all that
Mhm.
way right now. And isn't that a good place too, where when you have the humility to be able to say, God, I know the truth of who you are. I know in my head that is the truth. I do not believe it, but I know I am wrong. So that's like almost a growth mindset of saying, okay, there's places I can grow still when I know I am wrong, but recognizing that I still don't feel like God cares about my desires, that he's seeing this. But just, yeah, what you said about that didn't start with the suffering. The suffering just brought that to light. And that almost, I mean, it almost gives at least a twinkling of understanding why God may allow suffering, is
Mm.
because he wants us to be holy. He wants us to be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. He wants to mold our hearts into what God's heart is. And so
Mhm.
when we have ick in our hearts, sometimes that's him allowing that. I'm talking to myself right now. Him allowing that suffering just brings to light what was already there. So I love that you said that, Cassie, and just put it in that perspective. If you guys have any comments on that, please go for that. But also, then how God didn't take that desire away from you, that you still do have that desire for motherhood and for fatherhood. So how has God answered and fulfilled that desire for you guys?
Yeah. Oh, that's so many beautiful things and hard things to think about. But I think I'm still like, it's still a process of kind of unpacking that. It's something that I still take into my prayer time at times is like, um, you start to see things from your childhood, from your adolescence, and not that you have to like go digging into everything to be healed, but I do see that the Lord is continues to use experiences that I have um as I go throughout this world, like trying to open my heart to opportunities where he's calling me to live out that motherhood or whatever. And sometimes I feel like I've experienced tons of healing. I can talk about this without crying or anything when that was not always the case. But there's still you have those little like triggers. And there's a lady, Sonia Corbett. She's the Bible study evangelista, and she talks about those pop quizzes that the Lord has sometimes where something comes up and ouch, something hurts or something. So then it's like that's just more opportunity for the Lord um to heal you in other areas that you didn't realize. And a lot of times it goes back to our identity so much. That's why we try not to say that people are infertile because people tend to take that into their identity, and that's another one of those things that's just not healthy or helpful because my identity is a daughter of God. So a lot of times it's like I get to go back to places where like how is this affecting me as a daughter, as a mother, as a sister, as a friend, and all those areas. um but oh, how is he allowing us to live out our spiritual motherhood and fatherhood? um well, one thing that's cool, I'll try to make this like a really short story, but so as we met you at the leadership
Development
The
program
development
retreat?
maybe.
program. Yeah.
The
um
retreat?
yeah, the retreat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And then
yeah.
the whole program that we stayed with
Sure,
him
sure, sure.
afterwards,
Yeah.
but, um, so that was like a 9-month-long discernment process, which, 9 months, of course, that's gonna, like, bring up thoughts. But,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
after that, the fruit of that was that Ian and I actually said yes to being the local coordinators for Phoenix Engaged Encounter, Catholic Engaged Encounter, and, which is international, but ours is like a little Phoenix chapter of it. And we were just like, no, 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 we are not going to be in leadership. That's not us. We are such a tight bead couple. But we decided to say yes to the Lord about that. And there, it's been so hard, but it's been so good. And we've really seen ourselves as being able to, for one thing, really kind of like mentor and guide younger couples who come on the retreat, but mostly the couples who are part of the team. And we've gotten 3 new godchildren out of the deal. So,
Yeah.
Amazing.
Surprisingly,
um,
yeah, it was pretty wild, yeah, how that
yeah,
happened.
so
Wow.
I did just say to the Lord, you know, I don't know how you're going to fulfill this, but, like, I do want children in my life. Like, I want to have, like, a special place, a special connection with certain children, not just like, "Oh, all the children of the world," and, you know, uh, and so I feel like that was part of an answer to that prayer, and for those couples who have welcomed us into their family, and we just get to, like, love on those little babies, it's just such a
Yeah.
beautiful thing.
It's so huge that you say that, Cassie. I really love that because there's something about, like, let's say one of your siblings has a kid or something, you just love on them, you like give them a kiss, a hug, whatever it is, like, um, and it's so interesting because when you become a godparent, it's kind of like that. You're given permission, like, hey, here, take the kid, give them kisses, bless them, go run around. And I really love that. Like, what a huge blessing that was, that I didn't even know that I was gonna delight so much in being a godparent, and I just really love that. Like, we went and showed up to a little Sam's birthday just last weekend, and they're like, "Here's the baby here, hang out with him." Like, sweet, so it's so cool because I get to be, almost like, how the people have like a grandparent that has the grandkids and they spoil. I get to do that. I'm not going to give them sugar if the parents don't want sugar in the kid, but
Good man.
it's so much fun in that, like, you're there playing with them, and yeah, it's just this very holy, sacred space in someone's life that you're spiritually related to. You're not blood. It's a family that God has given us, and these are our children. And then that's the other thing too, is like these couples that, that asked us to be, the godparents to their children. It's also was because they received something from us that really meant a lot to them, and it grew their marriage, and they thought, we want this little one to be guided by this man and this woman. And what an honor. And it's like a gift that I'm still unwrapping right now, with all of it. But I give glory to God because he has put us in these situations by saying yes in this difficult kind of role for us as a couple. There are people who have a type A personality who are great administrators. That's not us. We never considered that. But we've said yes to the Lord. We're like, well, Lord, this is part of the trust exercise, right? It's an imperfect world, but Lord, you're gonna give us what we need on this journey. And he has, and more. And that's why I just, like to shout out to all my brothers out there. Connecting with your wife, you might be experiencing the infertility, that those things happening to you, or it could be your wife. But I tell you, there's so much more to your story. You matter deeply to God. You matter deeply in the church's history today. You are put in this world, um, with a special availability, with your personality, with your talents, with that loving person that you are, because someone needs it. And it just turns out it might not be, it could be that it's not a child, or it could be a child or many children down the way. You don't know. But nonetheless, you're always going to be looking out to share your manhood, your fatherhood, with others. And maybe if you are able to conceive children, have children, that you're still going to be, you would have grown that much more as a man, because you know what it's like to go through those difficult territories. You know what it's like to go through the jungle of difficult feelings, and still find your way through the maze of it. You as a couple are going through that. And that's the work, that's the field that, they say in scripture, the man who finds the field finds the buried treasure in the field, and he sells all he has and he buys the field. Well, a field can be a messy place. There's fertilizer, but the fertilizer is, the difficult things you go through, the crappy things in life. But that is also the very fertilizer that brings about the richest crops, the most tasty, beautiful fruits. And that's the point. That's the point of all the struggles we go through. And yeah, going through fertility issues for us was part of that field. And trusting the Lord in that, and just trusting in his goodness. and showing up, just show up to men's group, even when you don't feel like it, show up to the Lord in prayer, show up in journaling, show up in counseling, show up, uh, just show up and go like this. Put your hand like this, and the Lord's always, always, always going to give you something when you reach out to Him. That is one of the biggest lessons I've learned in our journey.
Yeah. How many God kids do you guys have?
It depends on how you count
Like
them,
7?
like combined or whatever.
Confirmation. We're also confirmation sponsors too, to like at least 3, probably like
So we have 12
godchildren.
official godchildren. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
love them
Can
all.
I ask you guys why adoption wasn't the route that you chose to go? I don't know if you ever pursued that and it just didn't work out, or maybe you never did. Can you talk a little bit to that?
Yeah, that could be a whole other podcast. But if you want the short answer, it was because the Lord didn't call us to it.
Yeah.
We did have some experiences going through foster care and like a kinship care situation. There's a lot to that, but I don't know how to make it short.
Yeah. Let's just put it this way. You have to have, how is it?
It's a call
You don't,
within a
yeah.
call.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the shape that God laid out for us, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that answer suffices absolutely, because I think with anything, the Lord, if it is the Lord's will, he makes a path very clear for you, and he makes a way for it. And if there's continuous closed doors or things just never open in the way that you want them to or expect them to, then that's the Lord saying no, like we're going a different direction. So I think that's
Yeah.
I think that answer suffices for sure.
Yeah, it
Well,
reminds me of like a lot of like Ignatian spirituality where would talk about like, were you in desolation and consolation when you go down paths? And that's actually was very helpful to us when we would sit there, contemplating, hey, do we want to try fostering? Do we want to try adoption? And we did try both in our journey. And yeah, it was talk about a lot of complex feelings and challenges that go with that. And yeah, that was where I think that Ignatian spirituality really helped us realize, like, you know what, we've been taking steps toward adoption, but I'm not feeling consolation as we do that. And it's so that it was kind of that type of path. I think that was very helpful to us to finally realize, like, you know what, that's just not how we're called. And that's okay, because there was a part of us too that always felt like, yeah, like when they say like, oh, so you've been married for 12 years, and so are you gonna adopt, and it was always just kind of like, oh, are you gonna buy a doll? I don't know, it was just always felt like kind of like this quick little, you gonna buy a band-aid for that cut, it was just. But it's like a whole different call. It's like, hey, do you want to be a deacon, or do you want to be, I don't know what it's like, there's still a lot of discernment that goes into that. And yeah, a lot of skills that need to be built. And yeah, so the more we were attuning to each other as how we were feeling as we were going through some of the trainings, and how we were feeling as we were listening to podcasts about, what it's like to adopt and all that, it became so much more clear as to, okay, you know what? These aren't, yeah, the tasks that bring out yeah, more joy and consolation out of us. So let's go in this other way. So yeah, I'd say that was very helpful to us. If folks haven't read about Ignatian spirituality, I think is really, really helpful.
yeah, the discernment of spirits. Isn't it a purple cover? Who is it by again? Father Timothy Gallagher.
Gallagher,
Yeah.
yep, Father
Yeah,
Gallagher.
yeah. So it's funny, that book took me all of college from this. Like, I started it as a freshman and I didn't end it until as a senior. Like, because I just kept putting it up and down, because it's a hefty book.
Yeah.
But
It
it's funny
is.
you mention it, is because he has a version that I actually literally within the last 2-3 weeks, I decided to just pick up and read, because I've had it for forever and I've never read it, which was also Father Gallagher, but it's Discernment of Spirits Within Marriage. It's like a light blue cover, and that was good too. Honestly, it was just good for me to be reminded of the rules of spirituality and like the rules of discernment. So if anybody's listening who has never heard of Saint Ignatius rules of discernment, or if you've never picked up the book or anything, it's very helpful when you're especially discerning something as serious as whether it be marriage or babies or adoption or whatever discernment process you're in. That's a really, really good resource. So I'm glad you brought that up. But yeah, Cassie and Ian, I am so grateful for your witness and your openness to share your story. And Cassie, you said something too earlier of when you were really in it, and you said, "I hate hope. If I didn't have hope, I wouldn't be hurt." And gosh, like, isn't that such a real feeling? But God just is like, that doesn't lead us to joy, though.
No,
Like,
and that's the wrong kind of hope, because that's like, I hope that the Suns win the basketball game. That's the earthly hope that will disappoint you at times. It's the desire that you don't have control over, but there is the supernatural hope which will not disappoint you. And that's the that's the thing to be praying for, really, because it is a supernatural virtue and a grace, and it's not something that you can force or earn or just positive think your way into. It's a gift. So that is an advice. That is some advice that I would give to anybody, is pray for an increase in the virtue of hope.
Yeah. One thing too was helpful for me is, like in Exodus, how you have, the Hebrews, and they're all going through the desert, trying to find the promised land, but then the Lord supplies them with manna, in these random places. The Lord gives them what they need out of thin air, by his grace. And that's really what I think a big part of the journey, your fertility journey is we're always going to count on your grace, Lord. You're going to give it to us when we need it. We're just always going to be hands ready. So if it rains down, I'm going to be like this, because if I'm like this or have
for those that are not watching, describe what you're doing with your hands.
Sorry. You cup your hands like you're going to catch rain, keep your hands cupped that you're going to catch rain. And that's what your prayer, that's what your spiritual development, all those activities you do, to keep yourself ready to catch that grace when it rains down, because the more you shape yourself as that vessel, when it rains, the more you're going to be able to hold on to that grace. And those are those activities, those habits, that attuning to your spouse, having good conversations with each other, talking about your feelings. It's okay to have mixed feelings and 5 feelings at once. It's okay to bring all that out and talk with your spouse, because that is that vessel of your marriage that's getting shaped and growing in strength.
Yeah. Cassi and Ian, thank you so much for sharing your story and being on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Haley.
Thank you.